It is 5:01 on February 2nd. We are being recorded. This is the meeting of the Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee, joint with Concord. I'd like to call Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee to order.
And I will call the Concord School Committee to order and note that we are being recorded, and you'll hear shortly that we're going to head into executive session with a return at 6 o'clock. To that effect, we'll entertain a motion that the Concord School Committee and, I'm sorry, forgive me, Sarah, let's do a roll call.
Roll call.
My
Yep.
bad.
Anderson's present.
Booth present.
Sorry, Bout present.
Mesdat present.
Rainey present.
Wilson present.
Very good, thank you. Sorry, I spoke out of turn there. Now we will entertain a motion that the Concord School Committee and the Concord Carlisle Regional School Committee will enter into executive session under Purpose 3 of the Open Meeting Law to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and return to open session at 6 p.m. Is there a motion?
So moved for both
Moved.
committees.
Thank you. And the second, Cynthia, I believe was, yeah, okay,
Correct.
by Cynthia, thank you. And roll call, please.
Anderson, aye for
Booth,
both.
aye for both.
Bout aye for both.
Mesdat, aye for both.
Rainey, aye for both.
Wilson, I for region.
We will be heading into our session and be back in public session at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was a quick walk down the hall.
We're fast and efficient.
Feels kind of magical, I have to admit. Some sort of time travel.
So SR means Susan Rask. Good evening, Susan.
Chief Judge is here too.
Very good.
Welcome.
So Sarah, all yours.
So welcome back to the joint school committee, Concord Carlisle and Concord. We are back for a vaccine distribution update.
And I will call the Concord School Committee back to order and note that we have 7 members among us. And with that, Lori, we're going to turn to you, please.
Sure, and I'm quickly going to hand it off to Susan and the chief. You had asked when we made initial discussions with the town about use of the high school property for vaccine distribution for a check-in. So phase 1, the first distribution of phase 1 is complete. The second phase is due next week. I'm going to use my words carefully. The second part of phase 1 is next week, so they'll get their second vaccinations of phase 1. So they're here to really talk with you on how it went and any tweaks that we need to make. Overall, it was incredibly smooth from our end. So we felt like things really went like clockwork. So kudos to all the hard work it took to make that happen. We made one small adjustment in timing just to clear the whole parking lot out before the vaccination traffic started to come in. So we pushed the start of the sessions closer to 4 o'clock. But other than that, really smooth from the school's perspective. So I'll turn it over now. Susan Rask, Concord Health Director's here, and Concord Fire Chief Judge is also here, and then we can have a discussion.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Susan or Chief, who wants to lead off?
Susan, you're muted.
So Susan, you're still muted.
Sorry about that. I was going to hand it off to Chief Judge. He kind of runs the logistics of the building more than I do.
Yeah, so I can speak to just the whole process. First of all, I mean, going back to the last meeting where we were, looking for your endorsement. Thank you for endorsing it. The building is in place, obviously, and we had our opening on January 12, 13, and 14. Susan, is that correct?
Yeah, 14, 15, and 16, but
I was
close.
close. I was close. So 14, 15, and 16. The 14th was a Thursday. We started at 3:30. At 3:35, I felt like we were being overrun. We learned some important lessons in the first 5 minutes. We had not deployed enough people upstream to stop folks before they got too close to the site. So everybody who had an appointment, I think between 3:30 and 4, all arrived at 3:30, and before we knew it, they were all on top of us and their cars were all right there. So the opening was dramatic. We got a hold of that very quickly, and we were able to get that first group pushed out. We got people upstream to catch the traffic coming in. And then it turned into an orderly event within a half an hour. We learned some really important lessons. The 3:30 start time was not good. It was not a good time. I think there was a basketball game, just in addition to the kids that are still, leaving at the end of the day and getting in their cars and heading out. So we had too much traffic there. So we're going to push them out in the future. We're pushing them out to 4 p.m. a 4 p.m. start while school's in session. The facility and the parking lot and just everything worked exactly as we hoped. I mean, we have enough space there that we can spread things out. As we move forward, we're going to start queuing people further back, having them entering from Thoreau Street like they did, but queuing them up further back so that we just kind of minimize the amount of time that they're actually in the parking lot and they move on. The next day on Friday, I went to the high school to meet the assistant principals, and I'll be perfectly honest, I walked in there fully prepared for whatever we had done wrong the night before, and they couldn't have been nicer. I mean, from their perspective, they told me that they didn't see anything that went wrong. They thought it was great. They were happy to have us. They took me to the library to show me where the kids had put up a thank you sign in the window to make sure that we knew about it, and that was awesome. And I made sure that night and then the next day to point it out to everybody who worked there. So it was really nice to have their enthusiasm towards having us there. Brian was awesome. I asked him if he could, on Friday, if he could just make an announcement and ask the kids if when they left school, if they could please leave through the Walden Street entrance so that we would have traffic moving all in the same direction. And he very accommodating, made a huge difference because now we didn't have traffic, going in opposing directions, particularly with people who aren't familiar with the high school property. The kids are certainly familiar with it, but the first responders from the area coming in weren't necessarily familiar with it. So that worked out really well. We learned a lot about moving vehicles through there and what it needs to look like in the future. I've been describing it as I think it needs to look like the Topsfield Fair or the Big E, that when you pull in, that there is somebody stationed at every potential turn to direct you which way to go until you finally land at the spot that you need to. So, really, really good lessons learned. No negative feedback from the staff at the high school. Very successful clinic. We put 430 first responders through there over the course of 3 days. And I mean, in my view, it was a really successful experience. And again, thank you folks for allowing us to do it there on that property.
Well, we would extend our thanks to you. We're delighted that it's working. it was not a difficult ask, given the magnitude of the problem that you and Susan and all the public health officials and first responders are trying to manage us through safely. So thank you. Susan, if you would please, our health director.
Yeah, so I agree with everything Chief Judge said. I think it went really well. In fact, it went so well and so smoothly that the coming clinics, which are scheduled for February 12 and 13, we're going to condense the 3 clinics down to 2 clinics. We think we can do, 240 people a day. So we're only going to do it Friday and Saturday for this upcoming weekend. It went well. We were hoping to be able to start we are hoping to be able to start the over age 75 population, and we were hoping to be able to start it February vacation week, doing it as a drive-through in the daylight for that population. We've been told by the Department of Public Health that towns are only going to get 100 doses of vaccine a week now, which is disappointing because so many people, particularly older people, are so anxious to get it. So that's a disappointment. So we're going to do some 100-dose clinics at the Council on Aging during the daytime because we think that's a better time for those people. But I'm hoping by mid-March we'll have access to more vaccine and we can start doing 2 and 3 clinics a week at the high school. But since I do not control access to the vaccine, it all comes from the Department of Public Health. We're waiting on their decisions.
Mhm. All right, thank you. We're assuming that if you had other ways in which the schools could support your efforts, you'd be very quick to ask.
Well, in fact, I have put out a call to the school nurses to ask if they would like to work at the clinics when we start doing big clinics, and I've had a positive response from 5 of them. So I met with them by Zoom call today, and that was great. So I really appreciate their willingness to, after working a full day of work, to come out and do a night clinic or a Saturday clinic.
Thank you. Okay, good. Delighted to hear it. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're supporting first responders in 5 towns now? Well,
Concord plus 5.
Concord plus 5. Thank you. Okay.
But then when we, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Susan.
No, I was just going to say, but then when we move to the over age 75, it will just be Concord residents.
Right. Mhm. Okay.
This past week, the building was able to be used by the school for some COVID testing, so that was nice. And I've expressed to Dr. Hunter to please feel free to use it anytime you can use it. For anything COVID related, the more the better. We may have testing coming up in a couple of weeks. If we can make that work, we may open up some testing there. That's in the preliminary planning stages right now. And again, we would be doing that in a very similar way to vaccinations in terms of the scheduling and in trying to be the best possible neighbor that we can.
How'd you make out in the storm with the winds and the snow load?
No problems.
Good. Okay.
Yeah. That structure is actually engineered for the northeast snow loads.
Okay. Do we have questions or comments for Ms. Rask and Chief Judge?
No, I'll just echo my gratitude, the support we had last weekend. Not only did we use the structure, but the support of the fire department and Tricia McGeehan actually avoided school staff needing to be on site, which just let us catch our breath while they took on the state-sponsored testing because of our, school transmission at Alcott. So I can't be, it's really been a great partnership all the way around.
I'm gonna take the opportunity to throw out a plug here. Trish McGeehan is the unsung hero.
Oh, no question.
He sure is.
In all of this.
He sure is.
Well, she's getting our virtual hugs quite frequently.
I'll let her know that. If she's not feeling it immediately, I'll let her know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Other comments?
Yes, I just wanted to add that during the vaccination clinic, I had the opportunity to actually drop off and pick up a child from CCHS. And I have to say, there was no confusion. There was no problem. There was no, I had no problem getting in and getting out. So everything ran so smoothly. It was just impressive. And just wanted to add that just seeing that building erected and hearing that our first responders are getting the vaccines, it cheered up the whole community. So thank you so much.
That's great.
I have
Well,
a
I
quick,
wish, go ahead, please go ahead.
I just have a quick question maybe to Susan. So in the clinics that will be for the general population, if we are doing just Concord residents, when teachers come up for, you know, wherever they are in phase 2, would we have, and I know doses are a huge issue, but will we have the opportunity to vaccinate our in-district teachers regardless of where they live? Just I'm thinking of like the convenience of that. They're here. I don't know. Just
I
as,
certainly hope so.
okay. So they could be perhaps the exception to the residential requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the town feels an obligation to vaccinate its essential workers, and our K-12 staff certainly are essential workers. So phase 1 opened this Monday, February 1st. First, it's for people over 75. Then it was going to be for essential workers, then people over 65. Last week, Governor Baker rearranged that. So now the over 65s come ahead of the essential workers. But as soon as it's essential workers and we can get the vaccine, I'm fully supportive with trying to get all of our town staff that are essential done. Because we have public works people, light plant people, you know, we have a variety of people that are essential to the functioning of the town.
I would think Governor Baker is going to have to make, if he moves it, if the teachers are eligible, that's a huge population. So he would need to, I mean, every district is going to have this responsibility. And so we're going to hope that, and the federal government is sounding like they're going to increase capacity. So I'm hopeful over the next couple of months, we're just going to get a lot more vaccine. Hopeful. I know everybody is.
Me too, because I'd like to be vaccinating a lot more people than we're able to do right now.
Yep.
All right, thank
Everybody's
you.
getting pretty frustrated.
Sarah, I wonder if we might entertain public comments specific to the regional discussion tonight before we close out the region, if there are any. We've got limited time, and I would ask that if there are public comments, it be specific to the regional part of our agenda. We'll have another opportunity for public comments in the Concord part of our agenda. Is that acceptable to you?
That is fine. Yep.
All right. So we'll ask now, are there any public comments relative to regional topics this evening? And I don't see any. All right. So Sarah, with your permission, we'll again thank Susan Rask and Tom Judge, our health director, and our fire chief and emergency services director, for joining us tonight. Thanks for everything you're doing. We know it's not easy. Susan, thank you for calling out all the people who are not quite as visible, who are essential too, the people who are moving the water and moving the waste, and you know, the myriad of chores that underlie public health in this town. They're all there every day. So thank you. Even though they're not necessarily visible to us all, they're critical to us all. So thank you for keeping those foremost in our minds.
Thanks.
Sarah, if you'll entertain it, I'll move that the Regional School Committee adjourn.
Second.
And a second from Cynthia Rainey. And you'll announce the roll call, Sarah.
All. Yep.
Anderson, I.
Booth, aye.
Stout, aye.
Reinstate, aye.
Mustafi, aye.
Rainy eye.
Wilson, I.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you
you
all.
very much.
Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Time.
So for the Concord School Committee that remains in session, we have one major item tonight, and that is focus on fiscal 22. Mr. Stanton and Dr. Hunter and their team have been preparing for this evening. Before we go there, I'll ask for liaison reports if there are any. I know it's not on our agenda, but I think it's my prerogative as chair to say that we can do that. It's not a discussion or a debate per se. And I'll turn to correspondence and say that we have had one piece of correspondence in regard to the declaration of a traditional snow day today, and the potential for adverse effects for children who are very much in need of in-school time. I think we are champions of in-school time. I also think that there was deliberation about today's decision, such that there was a look at the emotional wellness of kids that might relate to a traditional snow day once this year. But I think we're sensitive to the concerns that suggest that was a tough call, and not everybody in this school district was supportive of it. And this school committee heard it, and so we acknowledge that communication. With that, we've got a moment for public comment, should there be any, and then we're going to move on to the major substance and responsibility that we have tonight, and that is the budget. Are there any public comments? So I'm looking for a hand. Thank you very much. Mr. Benjamin, would you turn on your microphone and name and address if you would, sir?
Yes, hi, Todd Benjamin, Sudbury Road, Concord.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I would just like to, first of all, thank Mr. Booth and Dr. Hunter for their replies to my inquiry pertaining to the snow day and helping me to better understand that. My question, and this is something I've asked in the past, I would like to better understand what we as parents, what residents can do, concrete things that we can do to better support the administration and the school committee to get our children back in school full-time as soon as possible. I know this is obviously a very difficult topic, and we're all appreciative of all the hard work that all of you have done to get us to this point, and to at least have half days. I'm speaking mostly on the elementary school basis because that's where my children are. So I'm not as well versed in the middle school and the high school perspectives. But I'm wondering, what are some concrete things that we can do? Because it seems like when the conversation comes up, it's a very amorphous and nebulous concept that at some point something may happen. And I just would like to have some understanding of what are some of these things we're looking at. As was mentioned in the previous school committee meeting, the last time, the CDC has come out and mentioned that school transmission is not an issue. We're doing our pooled testing of staff and of students. We have masks in place. As a community, our case transmission is in a good place. And I really struggle to understand what more we can do, because nothing's going to be perfect. So please help me to understand what, as parents and as residents, we can do to support our administrators, our school committee, our teachers, and most importantly, what can we do to support our children getting back to school and learning?
Well, you said it brilliantly. Thank you. You know, because you're somebody so familiar with public meeting protocol, given that the very subject is not on our agenda tonight, we're not going to deliberate it, but we have heard you, and I think it's more than reasonable to expect that in 1 week's time, we'll have what we often have on our agenda, which is a COVID update. It's our euphemism for anything and everything related to subjects that certainly include what you have just articulated. So I'll ask for your forbearance and say that I want you to have faith you've been heard and that we will engage in this because it is critical. And I think it's an appropriate follow-on to what we heard from Chief Judge and Susan Rask, and again, something that you've expressed so well. So, Dr. Hunter and my fellow chair, Sarah Wilson, will see that this emerges on an agenda probably as soon as next week.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I think having some goals would be helpful because as the adage goes, if something isn't measured, then it's not acted upon. And having some concrete goals would be something that I think would give a lot of people a sense of comfort and a sense of something to strive for. So I do appreciate that. And the last thing I would mention for potential concrete steps to do that is, again, I'm referring mostly to the elementary schools. In the elementary schools, we have half days every Wednesday. When we combine those half days with professional development days, our students are out of school 3 days every month because of professional development days. That equates to 30 days out of the course of a 10-month period. I struggle to understand what professional enterprise requires that many professional days. So is there a way that we can shrink some of those professional days or some of those half-day Wednesdays to capture some of the learning that our children need?
All right. We'll see that you and I better understand that, and then we'll go from there.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Mr. Benjamin. Any other public comments, please? Seeing none, we're going to ask Dr. Hunter and Mr. Stanton to take the floor, if you would, please.
Yeah, let me just open us up and then Jared's got slides and we'll go back and forth. I think it's just important to remember tonight we're still working. So Jared will show you the timeline and that this is a status update. We're due to deliver a recommended budget number to you later this month. We wanted to be sure to provide this update because we're making a lot of progress. There's a lot of hard work going on between the building principals and Jared's office, and it's really starting to come together. We also have an update to the Finance Committee on Thursday night, so it was important that you hear this information first. I think from there, I'll let Jared pull the slides up and we'll be able to offer more context as we go. But we're not done. I guess that's the biggest mindset to go into this with, but it's going to give you a good idea of the direction we're headed.
Do you all see the slides?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. So I'm going to give you sort of the budget timeline because it keeps changing as of February 2nd. So just to remind you, on or around January 22nd, all of the departments and their principals sent their packets to me so I could go through them and get ready for the budget meetings that occurred, some before the 22nd, but many last week, the 25th to the 29th. Tonight, I'm going to be presenting you just the update, and I'll be presenting the same exact presentation on Thursday to the Concord FinCom. Next Tuesday, we plan to show you the draft of the FY22 5-year capital plan. And on the 23rd, we hope to get this number down and present the superintendent's recommended budget. Saturday, the 27th, Laurie and I will be presenting at the annual preview meeting. And then between the 23rd and March 19th, I put in there as the timeline for the school committee to work on and come up with a voted budget. I put a placeholder in for the public hearing on March 9th. And then March 19th is the due date for the warrant articles. So we have to have at least a school committee voted budget, which can go down. It just cannot go up by the 19th of March. I anticipate the budget book to be done by April 30th. The reason why for that late date, I want to just make sure that I can present the budget book that's not going to keep changing. I think hopefully by April 30th, I will have, we might not be done, but I hope to be done with our numbers. On the 25th of May, warrant article motions are due to the town of Concord. And then the Concord town meeting is on June 13th. Dr. Hunter, do you want to take this slide?
Yeah, thank you. So we've been really looking at all of the scenarios that could be on the table for the fall. Initially, we budgeted for all of them, and we've been strategizing that. And part of what we want to share tonight is that strategy. I think there is no certain path, right? So what we're hoping is that we can accommodate for all of the options, knowing that we pick a preferred option. And I guess to the point Todd just made, the one we've made for K-5 is that everyone is back full time, perhaps with some modifications, but that everyone's back. Now, a really big asterisk to go next to that is that we have not budgeted any staff towards a remote academy model, which we're running right now. That would have to come out of CARES Act and become part of the contingency planning, unless you direct us otherwise. The other major assumption that we made is that we'd be back full enough in time at the middle school that we would not need the same level of student supervisors right now that are, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So we have not budgeted for that either. And that would be an additional piece of CARES Act contingency. Those two big decisions made this budget start to come together in a much better way. Those numbers being embedded in the data, which they were up until a couple of days ago, had us with very significant increases. So that is a strategy that's up for discussion. That's where we're at right now, is that really we're driving the budgets toward full return, albeit modified. And we can talk more on the middle school and what that might mean. It's different than elementary, obviously. The other pieces that we've done is reinstate substitute lines. We had no substitute per diem money this year. We expect that at some point next year, we would start to bring in daily substitutes again. We've replenished some of the professional development, assuming in-person professional development begins to be options that COVID hadn't allowed for, and that teachers are actually going places again. And the software has been a really big project. We've been gathering. It was a big project, I think, that pre-COVID, COVID accelerated it so that we had software lines in many, many directions, many, many, many platforms. So all of that is getting consolidated and managed at the district level so that we eliminate redundancy, and we are, all streamlining how many and what platforms the kids are on for management purposes, and obviously for the fiscal benefit as well. So those are some of the major assumptions that we made going into this. Obviously, a couple of them are very big assumptions, and we feel we can look at CARES Act to be the backup plan to those. So we'll leave it at that for now. We can talk more on it as after Jared's through the presentation, or along the way, whatever you prefer.
Yeah. So I just want to take everyone through what we do in the zero-based budget process. At the CPS budget alone, we have about 690 lines. Now, not all of them are used, but we go through every single one. We take a look, obviously, at the salaries, the FTEs, longevity, stipends, etc. Laurie just talked about the software piece, which is a daunting task that the curriculum department is doing, but it's something that not only is going to make our lives easier, it's going to save us money due to all the redundancies. So that's something that it was really the Kristen Herbert's brain to do, and it makes a lot of sense. We went through all of our contract services, went through our PPE. What do we have in stock? Is that going to get us through the end of this year? What do we potentially need to get for next year to help offset the FY22 budget? Professional development, all of our memberships and fees, special education. I have a slide just on that, and I know we've been talking about all the work that we've done. The numbers are really going to show that story. We look at our tutors, we look at all of our assistants, circuit breaker. Circuit breaker, as you know, we can carry into next year. So we're planning for that. And then obviously all of our supplies and legal, etc. One thing that we did do this year is we combined our 3 or 4 legal lines into one, but there is not an increase. It's a level fund, so but it's all in one line this year.
Jared, can I just add, I don't think we want to understate the work in supplies and materials, because we did make them go back to their closets and absolutely inventory everything we have. Just knowing that we had closed and then we've reopened in these modified ways, it just was really important to know what we've had, what we've needed, and help them make better projections for next year. We're seeing very, cognizant awareness of spending this year. There's no question about that. And so we wanted to just really do the work to be sure that we knew what we needed and what we were learning we were using versus, potentially what we thought we would need. So that you're going to see that helped these numbers as well.
Yeah. One of the things I can add, I did not add this into the presentation, is when I do all of our cost categories, there's about 38 of them. We did carry software in some supplies and material lines that we did move out, but the net of all of the supplies and materials is actually down $19,000. I did not mention that as a cost savings because it's under the threshold, but we went through every line and every department did as well, and the numbers show it.
Lori, if you can hold on just for a second, Jared. Is there any assumption about summer, or is it too premature and you need a few more weeks to make an educated guess about summer?
No, there's a definite assumption we are in person for summer services.
Got it.
Both
Thank
regular
you.
ed and special ed.
All right, thank you.
No, thanks for asking. It's a
Do you
big.
think there would be a larger
information.
program because of?
We ran a very large program last year for the virtual aspect as kids came out of the closure. The data is going to drive that, Cynthia. That's the bottom line answer. Kristen's going to be using our STAR assessment and working with teachers as to who's in need. Ruth's coming at it obviously through the IEP process. So, and we're actually talking about if kids don't make the threshold to, not regress in special ed, may we still offer them regular ed services if the data shows that would still be of benefit. So it's going to be data driven, essentially based on the needs of the kids.
And what's the timeline for those assessments? In other words, will we have that information before we close the budget?
Yeah, usually because of the timeline we need to build summer school, it's usually the mid-year assessment that we use to drive that. So we've just done that in January and they'll be using that.
Great. Of course, my kids are now playing the drums, just in case you hear that in the background. If you asked Laurie and I a week ago if we would have numbers to you, in numbers I feel for a first pass this low, I would not have believed that. This is a draft. This is our first pass at it. Currently, right now, we're at a 4.35% increase, which is significantly higher than the FinCom guideline. But last year, if you remember, the FY21 budget received a 3.52% increase. So we are going to continue to sharpen these numbers, but some of the things that, and I'm going to go into them even further, that are sticking out to me anyway, is definitely the decrease there in the 9,000 series, which is the special education, and I'll explain that. And then fixed asset, that's our buses. We are having we do have 2 new bus leases in this year's budget. But other than that, there's really no surprises. A lot of our salaries, of course, are in the 2000 series, teachers being the largest driver there. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to identify all of our drivers at this point. This will most likely be adjusted, but right now we're seeing the biggest driver is the teachers' salaries, which we've always said, is between a 4% and 6% increase for everyone that's on a step and lane. We are currently in contract negotiations. The assistants and the tutors, that's also going up. The reason for that is when we did the FY21 budget, we had to take a lot of chances. So this was something that the FTEs may not reflect this, because the FTEs that we budgeted last year didn't 100% reflect the number, just because we didn't know at the time. So we took some chances. The substitutes, we are fully putting the daily subs back. We kept some long-term subs in the budget, if you remember, but we got rid of all the day-to-day subs. Professional development, we put most of that monies back. We are getting 2 new bus leases. Contract services, we are up 58,000. Maintenance, we decreased considerably to get last year's budget passed, and we thought we could do a 1-year takeaway on some of those things. We only put minimal back, but I want to point out that this number being right now is $165,000 less than the FY20 budget. So we are going in the right direction. Custodial maintenance salaries, utilities, very slight increase in utilities. Field trips, we're putting back. We left a little bit in the FY21 budget for field trips. And then the nurses, that's actually due to a couple lane changes, believe it or not, and a stipend for the lead nurse. So overall, right now, we've identified just under $2 million as our budget drivers.
The lead nurse is a split position, correct?
Is a split position. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jared, can I ask a question?
Yes.
The previous slide where you had the one before. Yes, I have a question about the top 2 line items. So the percentage does not, I'm thinking about in terms of salary increase, a salary increase. That's not the percentage. So where is that difference coming from? Are we talking about additional staff? Like for instance, the 7%.
Yeah.
So that's not a salary increase per se. If we talk about, 4% salary increase for everyone, what is that 3-point difference?
So in the assistants and the tutors?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just
So that,
top one too.
right. That again is, and I'm going to go more in depth on that when I present the full recommended budget. When we did the FY21 budget, we had to we took some chances, and Laurie, feel free to jump in, but we took some chances that, we sort of traded in some positions. Laurie, do you want to go ahead on this one? I can't see you.
A lot of the tutor and assistant piece, when we brought you a budget in the summer of last year, we had done our best to predict what we were going to need for COVID, for special ed, and we just hadn't lived it yet. So there's been some adjustments there, relatively minor. A good portion of the assistant increase is because we've expanded these intensive programs. And when we expand those programs, we can't just add kids. Sometimes we have to add another adult. So we'll break all that out. We're actually going to we know we want to dive deeper into that one. We also left we essentially stayed fully staffed coming into this year because of the COVID needs. We have to go back and review that. Some of this is going to be the same discussion of how much risk do we take? Do we, not knowing exactly what reopening is going to look like, do we, trim these down some and then know we've got to continue to review it right on through, even potentially past getting a budget number. So that we need to flesh all that out because there's a lot of moving pieces in that one line, for example. It's a combination of COVID and special ed programming. There is a cost of living raise in there. We got to flesh all that out so you'll understand where it came from. The other work to be done at the teacher level, we're just now starting to get in census numbers to even have any idea of what kindergarten counts are going to look like. We're reviewing class sizes. Again, we erred on the side of small classrooms because of COVID. We need to have that, reflection again on, do we need to stay in that same mindset, knowing that space is still going to be a safety discussion, versus, when we might push up a little bit higher when we don't have those kinds of issues. So we've got more of that internal reflection and then recommendation to bring you for discussion and feedback on both of those two major personnel lines.
Thank you.
And one other thing, especially on the assistants and the tutors, we are still working on our offsets. So there are some things in there because we're still in the beginning stages that actually get moved to, say, our METCO grant. So we do have people in there right now that are being charged to the general fund on paper in this budget, but then we take that salary and we move it. Because overall, believe it or not, from the budgeted FTEs, the assistants and tutors are down 1.7 FTEs, which doesn't necessarily reflect in this number, but as we flesh it out and continue to build it, it will.
That was a long-winded way to say, stay tuned.
Yeah.
We're going to bring you more information in 2 weeks.
So in addition to our cost drivers, we identified just under $407,000 in cost savings. The first is special education tuitions. Our tuitions are actually down $257,000 than budgeted this time last year or budgeted last year. But in addition, our IDEA grant offset, where we had $400,000 in the FY21 budget as an offset, we feel comfortable being able to actually increase that by an additional $40,000, so $440,000 as compared to $40,000, which is a good thing. And the other is the circuit breaker. So right now we're expecting to get $95,000 less than we got in the FY21 budget. Now that's a good thing actually, because that's saying that our tuitions are going down. So, but therefore my offset actually has, because it's a decreased offset, it's actually an expenditure. So the delta of the 257 and the 40 plus the 95 had special education tuitions at 201,000 savings for next year. In addition, case transportation costs, we got a credit, and so that was applied to FY22, which is a significant savings based on what was the budgeted amount in FY21 of $158,000. Lastly, our sick leave and our early retirement, we are now over the peak. So we're going to start seeing some savings in that line, and eventually that's going to go away. So if you add these four together, we're looking at a cost savings of over $400,000.
And I just want to distinguish that line dropping includes the most recent early retirees. So we're saving in the salary lines, but we're also seeing our the out payment of the actual incentive coming down because people are winding off. We're past that first 3 years. So that's going to just continue to wind down over the next 3, and eventually you'll have 0. But we get some nice savings along the way as it drops.
Do we know how we did with that? Sorry, do we know how we did with the early retirement incentive? Do we have any results back?
Yes, we had 3 Concord teachers and 1 high school teacher participate.
Thank you.
And Lori or Jared, this the savings shown here is really for the recent retirees. There's kind of a long-term savings. It doesn't get shown in every savings, each yearly savings outline, because we're looking at savings as compared to last year, but really there's kind of built-in savings multiple years through from, let's say when we first.
Yeah, let's flesh that out even more, because there's savings in multiple places now.
Right.
Initially and most extensively, the savings are in the salary lines.
Right.
And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars every year.
Yeah.
What you're starting to get now, when we first implemented the retirement incentives, we had to build a line up to pay out the incentive.
Right.
That first wave of participants is now through the whole payment. So we're starting to see the outpayment of the incentive number. That line is actually dropping because the numbers are smaller as the, this year and the coming years
Right.
occur. So it's still an outpayment you didn't have before we started all of this, but the outpayment's getting less all the time now that we get past those earliest years where we had the most participants.
Right. And the overall salary line is improved because of
Correct.
it.
Hugely improved.
Right.
And I imagine Jared will be taking us through a table at some point, as he
Yep.
has in the past. Yeah,
Definitely.
okay.
So right now we have, I wanted to show you some offsets that we have in there. The preschool tuition, because of the situation we're in, we only budgeted $70,000 in the FY21 budget for tuition receipts. We're expecting that now to go back up based on the numbers that we received in the last 2 weeks, the projections for next year. So that $70,000 offset is now a $140,000 offset. So that is a $70,000 net positive. And then I spoke about the IDEA. That's a $40,000 increase. And then at this time for circuit breaker, we are expecting about $95,000 less than we received in this current year. So here's
Can I just interrupt? There's another assumption built in that preschool's back in its normal mode.
Right.
Pre-COVID.
Right. Yeah.
So Jared, question, where's chapter 70 in this next year?
So chapter 70 goes right to the town. So we don't even really project that. That's not the region we would.
Okay.
But chapter 70, that's something that, Ms. LaFleur would budget for, but they're expecting about a 3.5% increase.
So just for my, so where does Carrie put that, Ms. LaFleur put that money in the town budget?
That will be part of all of her revenues. So sort of like how we build up the region's budget as your expenditures and your revenues, she would put that in her revenues, like we would with chapter 71, interest, etc.
And it doesn't need to be earmarked for education.
You have to meet net school spending requirements. It's how you're held accountable for it.
Okay.
Which we well exceed. So that's.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, chapter 70 wouldn't go and say a revolving account. It goes right off. Yeah. So here are our projected tuition costs right now. We're expecting just under 1.5 million in the non-public tuitions and 567,000 in collaborative. So for a total right now of 2,061,000. And then here are our offsets. So this is, like I said, $257,000 less than budgeted and hundreds of thousands of dollars less in the past 3 years. 400,000 or 500,000. Our students, and I'll give that number, on the 23rd, if not before, but, right now the out-of-district tuition is about 55-ish students. And again, 3 years ago, that was a lot more.
It was about 100 when I walked in 2017. That's K-12, just for clarity.
So yeah, the CPS portion is in the 20s.
Yep. It's great stuff and good for kids on top of it.
So that is a short one. Happy to answer any questions. And again, we'll have much more information to you before the 23rd, but hope to present the superintendent's recommended budget on the 23rd and next week, the Capitol.
I want to be sure I heard it correctly. Out of district is anticipated at 55 K-12, 20 CPS. Did I get it right?
Yes. Let me get you the.
That's ballpark. We'll bring you
That's
the
all
exact numbers.
Oh yeah, we don't expect more than ballpark. I was just curious if I got.
Yeah, it's 20 something at CPS.
Thank you.
26. But.
Okay.
I have a few requests, and if the committee will indulge me, for the budget book and for me looking at the budget in a different way. Is it possible to add a couple of items maybe as appendices to both of the districts? So I would ask that we have a full inventory of existing hardware, their age or purchase date.
We have that, so that's easy.
Yeah, I mean, I know you do.
Yeah.
And then the bus fleet, just
Sure.
so that would be good just to get the leases, and one more issue, but hardware, because just repair costs, because I know not on the buses, repair costs for the hardware yearly. I know it's probably mostly covered, but it'd just be useful to understand how we think of purchases. The other thing is just, if you could just have a revenue section in the budget book. I don't think I could find one. I know it's complicated because things are, a lot of these things are specific, go to special education or MECA or whatever, but it'd be good just to get a general idea of the revenues. I think that's it.
And Cynthia, conceivably, they could be referenced back to their source. So instead of not showing up where they traditionally do, you're saying they could be aggregated elsewhere also with an identification where it came from.
Right.
Yeah, what we try and do, and I think it's in there. It's in one of the appendices. Is we, as you know, we have two budget books. We did not do the fall one this year just because of the timing of everything.
Yep.
But usually in the fall, what we do is it's a smaller version of what we put out in the spring, but that includes, all of our bus fleets, the years, when the leases are up, and then our revenue sources. So I'll make sure that is in the April 30th one, and we continue that going forward.
And then when you refer to CARES Act, is that the existing CARES Act money, we're making no projections of what we might get beyond that?
So no.
We have not projected the currently debated package up at the Senate and House at the federal level. Not
Because we're assuming that we're going back to normal full-time in person.
one because we don't know where the politicians are going to land on that package, so we're not going to try to guess. And we're not sure, it's unclear exactly how that money will get targeted. There's hints that it'll be a little more earmarked than it's been to, I don't know. So we're not guessing in terms of how that's all going to play out. But two, I actually think we'd still be eligible depending on how the package comes together. And it may, even if it's a Title I formula, we'd be eligible for some funding.
Yep.
I don't think just because we're aiming towards full return, and big asterisks on, I'm not sure what that means at the middle school, because space is a very different entity there. To go to less than 6, even 3 is hard at Sanborn. So there's a lot to talk about there. So the nice part, Fatima, is if we know there's more revenue, all these unknowns have a contingency already available to them, which is why we're taking some risks in not budgeting contingencies for that in the budget. But we're open to feedback on that if we're taking more risks or depending on contingency, whatever way you all want to come at it, we need that feedback.
I guess I would just mention we all know there are other things that we could need contingency for too. So
Well, and circuit breakers flush again, which is another reason we're more comfortable there. And you will have a contingency line, of course, for more typical unknowns,
right?
Because those things happen too.
Yeah,
we have just so you know, 150 that's standard built into the general fund. And one thing, what we plan on continuing to do, which will open up even more of a contingency, is prepay, some of our collaborative tuitions if we can do that this year. And we can pay 3 months worth of the non-collaboratives. Mm-hmm. So that would free up even more potential money for the unknown.
Right.
I have a question with respect to the assumptions. If it's super challenging to get kids back in full time 6 to 8, why would we build the budget to that end? Like
So it depends what we mean by super challenging, right? And I'm coming up with what I know, which is teachers will be vaccinated by then. We're working on testing processes, which is another discussion for funding. We all know that. We don't have that figured out in the long term. I do think we all believe we want kids in full time. I think weaning our way out of remote has got to be part of the goal here, to Todd's point at the beginning. I think we've got other options in terms of the middle school. We got to look at what they are and what the trade-offs are. Going to 3 feet is just really hard the way we're set up at 7 and 8 in Sanborn. So we've got to vet that. It's not as hard at Peabody.
Right.
So there may have to be a middle layer of planning, which may or may not cost money. So some of this is just reconfiguring how we're doing things and processes and protocols. We've learned a lot right now. We know what cost us the most: remote options for the elementary kids and student supervisors at the middle and high school. By far, were the most expensive things we had to figure out. So that's where we're at, thinking the contingencies are enough to modify any of those middle ground pieces that we have to come up with.
Okay.
And there might be federal money for testing and cheaper.
And I guess that's what I was thinking when I said earmarked. Yeah, I'm hoping there will be. I'm hoping.
And PPE.
And PPE, yeah. Yep.
A question that I hope we collectively will address in the next couple of months is, has the pandemic and our response in schools driven any innovation that A, we want to hang on to for teaching and learning, and B, what are the cost implications? So I don't want to ask you to go into that deeply now, but I know you think about it every day.
Yeah, it's on the radar, and we're actually starting that process. The building levels are starting that process. We're going to be not creating task forces again, but we're going to somewhat simulate that through the groups that are already in place. The school improvement councils, bringing information back to all of you. Kristen's got her curriculum leadership structures to work with, the departments at the middle and high school. So we are going to absolutely want to start formally gathering that, and then structuring it so we've got, a classroom level, a school level, and then a district level view of what those, things that are what's been positive in all of this, because we don't want to just toss the bathwater here to go back to what we had when there's been bits of progress in places, and that's got to get captured.
Do I have this school improvement plan? During this year, the pandemic year, I know this is the year when we prepare for next year's improvement plan. Is the advisory board meeting regularly this year, virtually?
Yep. Okay. Yes, they are all meeting regularly, and the ones that met over the last couple of weeks started to have some of these discussions, and you will have school improvement plans in the spring like you're supposed to by law. And I guess the obvious is that some of the goals will be of how do we come out of COVID, right? But capturing that will be a big part of the process.
I think in regard to my previous comment about changes that we might want to hang on to, there's a place where that intersects with Cynthia's recommendation for a careful look at the hardware and how we changed our cycle, so to speak, last year, and what that means going forward.
Correct.
I'll confess I struggled to understand it first time around, so I'll benefit from the next walkthrough on that one, and I'm sure the new members will also.
Absolutely.
So, Jared, next step is the school committee re-engages with this on the 23rd for CPS. We begin at region next week, and remind me, warrant articles for CPS
next week as well. Well, we'll bring you our proposed capital plan, which I think, not to steal the conclusion here, but we are recommending within the town manager's budget without an additional article.
So is
least
he
at this point.
holding at the present time to his 900 number?
We need to confirm that, but it seemed that was likely.
Okay.
I'll confirm that.
All right.
So,
And I-
So we'll bring you
I
that when we meet again.
thought last year was
8:30.
Yeah. So we need to confirm what they're talking about.
what happened last year was it was 9 and this school committee brought it down to
Yes, we
the
did.
8:30, which I thought was really an excellent exercise, for lack of a better term. You know, it was really, I thought, really careful work that
Yeah.
you set us up for. So thank you.
Yeah.
Questions for Lori or Jared? Comments about the path forward?
Anything else you want to see in a few weeks when we meet again?
Well, I hate to be the guy that says it, but I'll repeat what Jared has said before. Things are going to be potentially tough in the future. That the economic issues generally have not caught up with municipalities like ours. So everything we do today is charting a course for future years when we might be doing more recovery than we are now. I'm no economist, but I think that comes with pretty sound evidence from the past. So thank you for being as careful as we can be this year. With that, hard to believe, 7:04. Should we just stay in session for a while in keeping with our? All right.
My family won't believe it if I go up there before 7:30. So they'll wonder. what's wrong.
Everybody, don't tell. Just
Yeah,
stay
don't
here where it's quiet. You won't be on duty yet.
How about a
There is a
virtual dinner
concert going
together?
on next door.
Okay.
Drums, now guitar. So
Nice,
I
Jared.
can go to a
Excellent.
jam session.
Excellent. What do we call it? Selective perception? We decide what to hear and see.
Well, I apologize. I disappeared for a few minutes. I heard a loud crash and crying, and I had to go check it out.
Yes, you
Everybody's
do.
okay now, but sorry to run off.
You're a school committee person and you have some other responsibilities.
Right. Yeah. I have 3,
Well-
but hey, who's counting?
So thank you all. I think we have set ourselves up for very nicely for the hard work ahead. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Jared. Might we have a motion to adjourn, please?
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Anderson, I.
Booth, aye.
Out aye.
Is that I?
Rainy eye.
Excellent. So thank you very much. Good
Thank
night,
you
all.
guys.
See you very soon.
Thanks for the hand clap there too.